Bonjourno screen. Fuck.
Leave that in. Leave that in. Leave
I
that
was
whole
so
thing.
excited. I was so excited for my Bonjourno, and then I totally botched.
You got to put more in. You got to put more oomph into it. Bonjourno.
Bonjourno ScreenAgers. We are back with another episode of the Canon, your favorite movie podcast. The only movie podcast where you get to hear me absolutely butcher the intro, but also the only movie podcast providing you with a watch list of the most essential movies ever made. My name is Raf, and we are once again back to talk a very essential movie with y'all. We're going to be talking Bicycle Thieves today. Got a little Italian neorealism going on. Joining me, two very special guests, two folks who I'm very excited to talk about this movie with. We've got Jason Christian from Cold War Cinema and Felicia Maroni from Seeing Faces in Movies. How are you guys doing? Welcome back to the Canon. Jason, you were on a couple weeks ago. Felicia, it's been like almost a year since we've had you on.
I think
but
so. Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome back to both of y'all. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. Yeah, happy to be here.
Very happy. No, thanks for having us both back on. It's nice to see both of you. We're all kind of doing the rounds of each other's shows, which is nice.
Yeah. We've got a cool little community of film fans, movie podcasting folks. We all jump around to each other's shows. I just can't speak today. I don't know what's going on, but we'll power through. We all hop on each other's shows. We're in various chats together. It's a good crew. I feel like folks who listen to the Canon, listen to Cold War Cinema, listen to Seeing Faces in Movies, probably know some of the other characters that we're talking about and referring to who are in this circle. But I feel like we're building this is like the new crew of like power players within the film podcasting space, I think, personally. I don't know if you guys agree.
I mean,
we'll go with that.
I'll go with it.
I trust your judgment.
But this is the first time. So you guys have been on each other's shows, is what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the first time you've been on the Canon together, although you have both been on separately, talking different movies. What have you guys been on for? Jason, we just spoke about M with Paul, also from Cold War Cinema. I feel like we've had you on a few other times. What other movies did you join us for?
I did Casablanca. I did The Treasure of Sierra Madre. And is that it? I think that's
Big Bogey Guy.
Yeah, Bogey Guy right here.
Yeah.
And I was on Felicia's podcast to talk about another Vittorio De Sica movie called Shoe Shine. So that'll probably come up later.
It definitely will. It for sure will. In terms of child actors, because I feel like you can't talk about this era of De Sica without talking about child actors. But yeah, we did Shoe Shine. And for the Canon, I came on for Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Yes.
Which is fantastic. And I can't remember if I've been on another time. I think that was my first time.
Yeah. I feel like there was another movie, but I'm blanking.
There might have been. It's been a long year.
It's I can't believe we're already at the end of the year.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely wild. So just like minor programming note for anyone who's interested. I was originally planning to have this episode come out last week, day before Thanksgiving. We were going to do a Thanksgiving special episode all about an Italian father and son searching for a missing bicycle, because that feels like the most festive, Thanksgiving holiday appropriate kind of movie to be talking about. But this season has been full of scheduling conflicts and updates for various reasons. Life has been kind of busy and getting in the way of, a consistent schedule. But I'm happy that it worked out this way where we're talking about it now, because like I said, and like I will say many times, again, throughout the course of this episode, I'm very happy that we were able to gather this particular crew of folks to be able to talk about this particular movie. Before we get into the movie itself, though, while we're here, with you guys on, want to give both y'all a moment to quickly plug your shows, give a brief, overview of what it is that you're doing over there and why folks should listen to it. I personally am a fan of both shows. Like I said, we're all in this, crew circle of movie potting friends. So, which is ironically a name of one of the other shows in the circle. Um, but yeah, give us, whoever wants to go first, give us a quick overview of your show and why folks should be listening to it.
Yeah, so for Seeing Faces in Movies, essentially each month I focus on like a different director or a cinematographer and invite guests on for usually 4 to maybe 5 movies that we cover within their filmography, and it's mostly a celebration of that artist and what led them to make these films, where they were at in their career, and talk about just their stamp on the film, knowing that obviously there's multiple people involved in a film, but their specific, you know, breath that they bring to these stories. So I just wrapped up the Douglas Sirk series, and I'm by the time this comes out, I will have started a series on Kelly Reichardt. So going a bit more modern than I usually do.
Nice.
Nice.
People are always shocked when I have anything with the two as the year that starts off with any 2000. So I'm going into more modern stuff, which is nice. And then I'll be going back to the 40s after that, which is where I'm most
Back to your
comfortable.
wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Awesome.
that's the show.
Very fun. Do you know which movies you'll be talking about for the Kelly Reichardt month?
Yeah, that series, I usually record it all in advance. So the series is recorded. So I'm doing Old Joy, Wendy and Lucy, Certain Women, and Night Moves.
Hell yeah. All movies that I
Yeah,
haven't seen. So there you go.
they're
But
great.
yeah, a reason to watch, a reason to listen. Um,
hmm
very exciting stuff. Uh, Jason, what's going on with Cold War cinema?
Well, we're still in the middle of our second season, and we're still looking at Soviet films and Hollywood films alternating from episode to episode. So we just did an episode on Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original, and that's just a fun movie to see and to talk about. And
Yeah.
I think we got into some themes that people don't ordinarily think about. We've tried to complicate some of the standard readings of the film. And the next movie we're going to show is it's called Ballad of a Soldier, and we're just kind of working our way through. Still in the 1950s. We started in the 40s, we're still in the 1950s, and we're working our way chronologically. So we're going to end this season sometime in the middle of next year, and we'll make it into the 60s. And
Hell
then
yeah.
we're going to
Not quite the 2000s, but we're getting
we're moving there. We're pacing ourselves.
Yeah.
There's a lot to discuss. And a lot of the movies we show, that we discuss, are a little bit under the radar, a little bit lesser known. Not Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but I would say
Mhm.
more than half are a little bit somewhat obscure, but very interesting films. So we're trying to use cinema as a way to examine culture, political realities, history itself, and things like that. So it's like a window into a time. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
I love that. So I was thinking while both of you guys were talking, and like thinking about your shows in relationship to this show, where here on the Canon, it's like a little bit more basic. We're doing movies that are considered essential, the canonical films that you can't really understand the history of cinema, the story of cinema, um, without, watching. And both of your shows, you guys are really like taking that next step into being cinephiles, which I really appreciate, because I feel like whenever I'm talking to you guys and some of our other friends, you guys really push me to explore older movies, more foreign films, things like that. Whereas like the Canon is a great starting point, and then Seeing Faces in Movies, Cold War cinema, you guys are like really taking it sort of like to the next level. So once someone has experienced Bicycle Thieves, they can then graduate on to some of the movies that you guys are talking about, which I think is cool. That's like a nice, fun kind of like relationship that all of the shows kind of have with each other. But yeah, I feel like such a basic bro
It's
when I'm
not
chatting
basic
with
at
you
all.
guys.
You're
It's
not a
not.
basic bro.
I mean, you always need a jumping off point, and I think it's great to bring up because you're not talking about, the latest blockbuster, which again, there's no
Yeah.
judgment for people who do that. But, if you're talking about bicycle thieves, that's not basic at all.
Yeah.
Um, one quick note, I just wanted to say, Jason, I love Ballad of Soldier, and no one talks about that movie. So I'm very excited to listen to that. It's such a great movie.
I'm glad to hear that. I haven't watched it yet, but we're about
Oh,
to
okay.
cover it, so I'm going to watch it soon, and we're going to
I
cover
hope you
that.
enjoy it.
Yeah, I probably will. I'm Soviet pilled at the moment. I'm a fan.
Yep.
I'm laughing because uh, on our M episode, you mentioned the same thing, that you're Soviet pilled right now. So happy to know that not much has changed in the last month or so.
I mean, and there's I had a tweet go viral recently, and it was a picture of this guy like digging for diamonds, and then it zooms out and you can see that he's in this enormous like cavern full of diamonds, and I wrote above it, when you discover Soviet cinema beyond Tarkovsky. And it's it's like a zoomed out view of a guy that he has no idea the riches that he's about to find.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
that's sort of how I feel about it. And the tweet went viral, and
that's
all
where
these
you are
people were
right now.
chiming in like, "Oh, you got
Oh,
to see
wow.
this, you got to see that."
That's
That's
awesome.
nice.
I love that. Well, hopefully that will be the purpose that we can serve with this conversation that we're about to have with Bicycle Thieves, where
Hmm.
people will discover Italian neorealism beyond Bicycle Thieves, including myself. This is the only example of this movie or of this film movement that I've seen. I think the first time I watched this movie, it must have been in some sort of academic setting. It was in like some kind of, you know, intro to like international film course or something like that, or like maybe even a film studies 101 kind of class, as like, okay, here's the definitive example of this kind of movie that you need to understand in order to like gain a full picture of, you know, what was happening in film, you know, across the years throughout the 40s, post-war, in Italy, all that good stuff. For you guys, when did y'all first come across this movie?
I So I didn't go to college right away, but I got into cinema toward the end of high school. And so, at this time I was sort of looking up like the greatest movies of all time, that sort of thing, like just
Hmm.
looking around on. And back then I was just renting movies at video stores, which I still do actually here in Atlanta at Videodrome, but
Shout
I
out
have to collect.
Videodrome.
Shout out Videodrome.
Hmm.
But I found out that this is one of the most canonical movies of all time, and it truly is.
Hmm.
It's up there with like Casablanca and all these other iconic films. And so I saw it then, which was a long time ago, and I loved it because I hadn't seen anything like it. And I think it unlocked something for me, that you can show films about ordinary people, underclass people, very struggling people, and just have the simplest story. It doesn't have to be a complex theme. It doesn't have to be lots of twists and turns. It doesn't have to have a huge cast. And I guess it was just really interesting for me. So that's when I first saw it, and I've seen it over the years.
Hmm. Yeah, I also saw it in film school, and I can't remember if it was first or second year, but we ended up watching two Desika that year in my film art class. We did a neorealist month, uh,
Hmm.
or week, I should say, and the prof that I had would always be like, "Okay, this is the top one, but I'm going to show you the one that's a little lesser known." It was still
Hmm.
another Desika, so we watched Umberto Day, and it was
Hmm.
probably the first time I'd ever cried in public, in front of people, and I was like, "Cool." And then we watched for our film history class Bicycle Thieves, and then once again cried, and I was like, "Well, I guess that's just what's going to be happening anytime I watch a Desika film," and that's dead true to this day. He does have some comedies that are great too, but
Hmm.
his, his big ones from this era are tearjerkers.
Yeah.
If you have a
Wow.
heart,
I didn't realize that we were going to get into partial therapy session with this episode, but
yeah,
whatever we got to do. Uh, in terms of his comedies, so again, like I don't have a ton of knowledge about DeSica's career, but from my understanding, he was making comedies like earlier in his career, kind of in tandem with the Mussolini regime, and then like, or was it before
he was
Mussolini, and
he
then
was
like,
acting he was acting in
hmm,
comedies, but he wasn't
okay,
directing comedies until later.
yeah,
so then was it like, I mean, like most people, which the war really just like fucked everyone up
Yeah.
because you know
Hmm.
for
hmm,
reasons. And he kind of came out on the other side and he was like, I don't really want to make comedies anymore because we just saw like the most horrific things ever happen. And that's sort of like where Bicycle Thieves, Umberto D, and like other movies within both his career and this like movement as a whole kind of came from. So it sounds like, Jason, that's um, kind of the right understanding, the right path that we can be on in terms of like understanding this movie in particular in DeSica's career and just within like Italian filmmaking as a whole.
hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess while we're here, like I always do like to talk about the context that these movies within the canon are made within, because I think it's really hard to understand what makes a movie essential if we're not thinking about that. And a movie like Bicycle Thieves is so unbelievably tied to the context of the time that it was made, like most post-war movies are, because the the uh the implications of those world events are so directly tied to the art that people are making. Um, and it's like extremely apparent in this movie. So do you guys have anything else in terms of just giving us some like quick context around the circumstances and like the world, the historical happenings around like when this movie was made and like the world that DeSica was making Bicycle Thieves in, and like how that plays into why this movie is essential all these years later?
I mean, I could definitely talk to more his mindset, less of like historical accuracies.
Give it to
Maybe
me.
that's Jason's
I can fill in
forte.
some history
That's
later.
good because, but in terms of him, it is kind of what you said, where he was like, now's maybe not the time for comedy. He wanted to show what had happened to his community and his people and show
Hmm.
them that these are people who are resilient and they will be able to overcome what was done to them by their own, people in power. So, yes, the stories are sad, but he also wanted to show you the hope that the Italians have and continue to have, and then slowly makes that's why he then kind of moved back towards comedy after this.
Mm.
Um, I think that it's so fascinating to me to watch these stories and see the poverty on screen, but no one seems to be super unhappy. They're just like, okay, we need to recoup, we need to rebuild. But like, you also had to be honest and say, hey, these are people who are living day to day. They might not know when their next meal is, but you still have a son who loves his parents, he loves his father, and that doesn't change just because of what happened in the world around him. So it's like very human stories without trying to make it into, oh, you need to feel bad for this. These are just real human beings. And they're literally real human beings that he picked up off the street to be in this movie and put on some of the greatest performances you'll ever see on film. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, we're gonna
So in
circle
terms
back
of,
to
yeah.
that. Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
for
we
sure.
will.
Yeah.
yeah. I can say a couple things about the history. So briefly, I mean, as you said, the war had devastated Italy and much of Europe. honestly. And the economy was completely destroyed. A lot of buildings were destroyed. Uh, Unemployment was very high, and people are desperate for work. And the United States actually played a really key role right around this time. So this came out in 1948, and the Marshall Plan. It's called the Marshall Plan, but basically this is an economic uh, package put together by the U.S. to help rebuild Germany and all these different countries, Italy, because they were, and this is just what happened. There was this extremely polarized political situation. So you had still a very thriving, fascist movement in Italy that was aligned with Mussolini, who had just been deposed and, you know, strung up upside down by partisans. And then you had a very large communist party, which De Sica was a member of. And the US went in because the workers were getting so organized and they were so desperate. That was resonating with a lot of people. And the United States came in to essentially stabilize the economy and help build it, and to kind of take the wind out of the sails of the left wing movements right at this exact moment, 1948. But that world of underclass poverty and desperation is very much the subject of all of these movies that are called Italian neorealism, which we can get into a little bit more later. But
Hmm.
all of these directors were trying to show this is life for many people, not everyone, but a large percentage of people are living hand to mouth, like you said. If they miss, if one little thing goes wrong, they might be on the street, like they're hanging by a thread. And so that idea is well represented in all of these movies at this particular moment.
Thank you both for the context. We have the personal understanding of De Sica and like what he was sort of thinking as a filmmaker, going into this project. And then we also have the larger historical context, the global, um, you know, geopolitics of what's going on in Italy and how that, and like how both of those things fully inform what it is that this movie becomes and what this movement becomes. So before we like hone in a little bit more on the film itself, we're throwing out neorealism a lot, which I think most people understand or are like at least like vaguely familiar with what we're referring to when we throw that term around. But let's just like quickly define it and talk a little bit more about what that movement was made up of, and then how that relates to and how it like plays out in this movie. So then we can like get into Bicycle Thieves proper.
Do you want to say something first, Felicia?
Sure. Um, to break it down in the most uh, Cliff Notes way, and then we can expand on it. The movement came about as very bare bones. These are films that are filmed on location, on real Italian streets, often using non actors. They're using natural lighting. Everything is just stripped down. And if anyone who's listening is kind of familiar with Lars von Trier and his Dogma 95 movement, it's kind of an adaptation of that, just being like, we're
Mm,
setting up a camera and we're filming. It's not docu-realism.
mm-hmm,
There's a script. They're not improvising, but it's still using real human beings, real stories, real environments that they're in without dressing it up. The streets that they're filming on, and I know we're not talking about Umberto D, and I keep mentioning it, but I think of some of the shots in that movie,
mm-hmm,
and I'm like, nowadays they would have to dress that up and turn it into something, and they just shot that. And this is still, you know, within streets that are devastated, but it looks so beautiful. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
most Cliff Notes version of Italian neorealism.
Yeah, I would just add that the years that this movement
Hmm.
took place are roughly from around 1943, the middle of World War II, toward the end, I guess, to the early 50s. We'll say 1952, and this is at the time of peak poverty in and devastation and political instability, probably in Italy. I mean, Italy has had a rough time throughout the entire 20th century up to present day. It's always going through cycles of violence and cycles of political instability and so forth. But it was a really rough time, and some of the directors associated with this movement, besides Vittorio De Sica, are Roberto Rossellini, um, Luchino Visconti is another big name. These are all canonical directors,
Hmm.
some of the most famous directors of all time. Giuseppe DeSantis, or DeSantis.
Cousin of Ron.
Which one?
Oh, this Ron
I,
DeSantis? No,
oh God.
I hope
Well,
not.
it's spelled differently, but yeah, I hope they're not related. but but yeah, so those are those. There's several other names, but
Hmm.
those are the sort of the big names, I would say.
Yeah.
Uh, um,
And
yeah,
just to sort of like add to the great definitions that you guys gave us, like why this is important and like revolutionary. When you think about movies that were made in the earlier parts of the 40s and the 30s back to the 20s, a lot of it is soundstage stuff, very manicured, put together. We're not,
Even Casablanca's made in a
yeah.
Hollywood studio.
And then you think about the kinds of stories, the people who these stories are about. It's not regular everyday folks who are on the ground dealing with extremely mundane kind of issues. And I think what makes this movie so remarkable is like you watch it in 2025, and Felicia, like you were saying, there have been like countless other movements that have kind of pulled from this, but this was really the first time that people were doing something like this, getting non-actors, shooting on location, telling stories about a dude and his fucking bicycle. Like, if that's not the most like mundane everyday story that you can tell, I don't know what is. Like a dude who needs a bike so that he can work, so that he can feed his family. Like, that wasn't something that people were making movies about, because who wants to go to the cinema? Who wants to go to this great art form where we can be transported to different worlds and be told these amazing stories about these grand characters and these, amazing epic tales of war and space travel and like all these different things. Like, if I can go see that, why would I go see a movie about a dude and his bike? But the beauty is that this movie works as well, if not better, than those stories about all of those other different things. And it has really informed so many um, independent, uh, realistic kind of like film movements that we've seen for the last, 80 years.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's because the stories are kind of timeless. They're
Mhm.
evergreen stories that you don't even really need to know what happened in that time in Italy to still relate to these characters in any sort of way. You don't even have to have kids. You just have to be a human being who has lived any sort of real life where we all have
Mhm.
struggles, everyday struggles. And that's why this film still is such a huge deal. And for people who don't even watch that many older films, but are starting to get into older films or just films outside of their comfort zone, Bicycle Thieves is usually one of the first I think that people gravitate towards. It also helps that a lot of those films are quite short and
Mhm.
accessible, and people are like, yeah, I can watch a 90-minute black and white film in another language, and then usually it sparks something beautiful, and then we're like, okay, I need to watch more of this, even though like you're crying as you're googling what other films they've made.
Yeah. I would just add that there's two types of, well, there's more than two, but maybe let's just go with this idea that there's maybe two sort of motives or strains of film watching, maybe, let's say, just hypothetically. you know in the early 1900s, in the early 20th century, people would go to Nickelodeons, these early cinema movie houses, that cost a nickel. And for one thing, it was a place where you could sit inside in the shade, and maybe they had fans, if not later air conditioning. And you could, they used to call Hollywood the dream factory, and you could kind of escape from your hard life for a couple of hours watching something on screen. So
Hmm.
that motive has persisted. The spectacle is a nice escape. It's escapism, to go to other planets, to these fantasy stories, these love stories. They're a nice break from the hardship of life. And some of these directors that I just mentioned, they go on to make other types of films. Like um, Vittorio De Sica makes comedies and very mainstream, different types of movies later in his career. But the idea behind these films was, wait a minute, let's not pretend like poverty doesn't exist. It's right under our noses. You just stepped over a homeless person to get into the movie house. Why not shine a light on that aspect of life too? And many of the people who like this were middle class, comfortable people. They're
Hmm.
like, it sort of like makes them, it reminds them of their privilege
Hmm.
and their humanity and so forth, but also other people impoverished, the working classes also like it. But some people like to be reminded of this stuff and some people don't. But this is the idea. It's like, let's try this other type of cinema that's um, showing you something that normally doesn't get shown on the big screen, essentially.
Yeah.
Um,
When
it's
we
almost like it has a lot in common with a documentary, even though it's not
yeah,
a documentary.
when we think in 2025 about like the need for like diverse voices in filmmaking or whatever to tell stories, because everyone has a story to tell, and a lot of uh a lot of movies and TV shows that we see in like a modern context are usually people drawing from like their real life experience, because like we all have a story to tell. Everyone's story can be interesting, but again, in 1948 most of the stories that we were telling weren't about everyday people, and this was a movie and a story that reflected the lived experience of so many Italians in that particular time. And I don't know that it directly has influenced the need or desire for everyone to be able to tell their own kind of story, but I don't think that we would have that sentiment today if it weren't for a movie like Bicycle Thieves. Not to like overstate the importance, but I do think that that is a truth in terms of like the modern contemporary media space that we live within. Um, so we've been talking for a while about and around the movie without actually talking about the movie itself. We've talked a little bit about what the movie's about, but do either of you guys want to give us like a quick plot synopsis of like what's going on here, what this movie is about, so that we can like dig into some of the some of the specifics about why this movie is so amazing.
I,
I can, or you can.
Anyone?
you go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, the basic premise is there's this there's this man named Antonio Ricci, Ricci, and he's out of work, like so many people are. And he's in this line where they're calling out job postings, and he gets a job, and he's lucky to have it. There's a crowd of people who aren't getting jobs. He gets the job on the condition that he has a bicycle. And what we find out is his bicycle is in the pawn shop. So he gets his wife gathers up their sheets, bed sheets, and they pawn their bed sheets. That's how scarce and desperate that's how scarce resources are and how desperate these people are. They pawn their bed sheets to get enough money to get the bike out of pawn. And so he takes this job. And his job is to wheat paste publicity posters for for wealthy people, for
Hmm.
products, for movies, for whatever. Because there's this other society of people with plenty of money and jobs and relative comfort, and he's putting up posters for them. I don't think that's just an accident that that's his job. I think it's an interesting choice. And lo and behold, his bicycle is stolen, and suddenly the movie turns into this basically like like a detective story. Essentially, he has to go on this wild goose chase with his young son, who's about, I don't know, 8 years old probably.
Hmm.
8 or 9, and they just go looking for this bike all over the place. And as the movie goes, he's more and more desperate and more frustrated because he can't seem to locate this bicycle. I don't know if I should spoil anything at the end, or does it matter?
I think we can spoil Bicycle Thieves at this point.
Well,
Everyone's had a little bit of time to watch it.
he's so desperate because he needs this job desperately, because he has a young baby and a son. So he has 2 children and a wife, and they're living, hand to mouth. So if he loses his job, it's going to be bad. They may end up in the poorhouse or on the streets. And so he's desperate to get this bike, and at one point toward the end, he sees a bike sitting there, and he steals it. That's how bad he has been debased by this situation. um, and he gets caught immediately by a crowd, and luckily the guy who owned the bike didn't press charges, and we're just left. He and his son are just sort of standing there in shock, in devastation, realizing, look how bad, like, this situation has pushed me to my limits. And sort of the big takeaway is poverty breeds crime, and poverty debases everyone, not only the victims but also the perpetrators. No one really wins in a situation where there's this much economic poverty and unemployment and so forth. So it's a really hard hitting story, really.
The
Yeah.
villain isn't the person who steals the bike, right? The villain is the
Yeah,
system that
unfair economics.
forces these people to situations where their only recourse is stealing a bike. Like you're
Right.
saying, people don't just like wake up. Richie didn't wake up one day and think like, I want to steal a bike because that sounds like a fun thing to do. He stole a bike because he was so desperate to be able to care for his family that he was forced into that decision, the same way that whoever stole his bike was forced into that same situation.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, the end is
Yeah,
devastating because you realize it's all part of this cycle, this
for sure.
bicycle, if you will.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, exactly. Like you said,
Well
he
said.
didn't wake up and choose that, because otherwise he would have just done it off the bat and they wouldn't have to pawn off their bed sheets. And the same way, when he catches the person who stole his bike, he realizes this is someone who's in the same situation, as me. And he's like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do when I now look like the bad guy for accusing someone? And this bike is gone already. He's already sold it.
Yeah.
So it's just devastating, this whole movie, to be honest. But it's still so beautiful. And as Jason and yourself were talking, I was just having flashes of certain scenes that are moments of relief, which maybe we'll talk about some of those scenes,
Let's
that
talk about them right
because
now.
I
Which
think of
scenes are we
one
thinking of?
specifically where he and his son go and sit down at the restaurant. Um, and it's a moment that obviously these are not people who can go to a restaurant regularly, if ever, to be honest. And it's a moment where he just needs to sit down and clear his head, and also offer his son some relief too, because he realizes the son wanted to join along, obviously, but his son probably can feel his stress and desperation, and he just needs to be like, you're still a child and this doesn't need to be on you right now in your life. And I think it's such a beautiful scene, just seeing them sit down and you actually get to see them smile, because
Mhm.
he's definitely not smiling most of this movie. The
Yeah.
son's pretty jolly because he's a kid, he's still living a child's life as he should. But you get to see the father sit down and you can see a bit of the weight lifted off of his shoulders just for that brief moment. And it's nice to have that relief as an audience member, because even though the movie's not long, it's still quite heavy from off the bat, where you're like, okay, I'm in it, but I am not necessarily enjoying following these people in this search for this bike, and you're stressed out. The minute the bike is stolen, you're stressed out from there. But you're also stressed out from him waiting in the line to see if he gets his job. So having those little moments of just breathers for the characters and the audience watching it is what makes his team of writers, because he had a few writers on this, including himself, so good at telling stories. So yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a great, really good point, a really good observation. And you think, because you know the movie's called Bicycle Thieves, and if you haven't seen it, there's a few other earlier moments where you think the bike is going to get stolen, which just adds more tension.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, this is the moment. Oh, okay, it didn't get stolen, and that just compounds and compounds and compounds. And I agree, that's a good moment, and it's also just a reminder of this is what normal life looks like for many people and could look like for these poor people if they just had a job and a stable career. Like, it's the simplest thing in the world to get a meal at a restaurant, and yet it's not an option for many people, and they feel quote unquote normal for a few moments. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how this movie is able to make things that we would see as otherwise things that we would take for granted, that we don't really pay much mind to, and it makes them the most dramatic things imaginable. A meal at a restaurant between a father and son. For a lot of us, we have the privilege of not needing to think too much about that, but in this movie, it's such a source of great drama for these two characters. It pushes the narrative forward in like fully emotionally intriguing ways where in a movie about, middle class people or about a superhero or something, it just wouldn't have that same weight. But because we're we're looking at everyday folks with everyday struggles, we understand the weight and significance of those small moments. Uh, the what you brought up about the scene in the restaurant was, it got me thinking about what is one of the most fascinating things about this movie, which is just like the father son relationship at the core. And what's his name, Enzo Stiola, who passed away earlier this year, which I think like got a lot of people like rewatching Bicycle Thieves earlier this year.
Mhm.
Very sad to hear of his passing. He is This is one of the best child performances of all time, easily. Like he maybe the best. He absolutely knocks it out of the park. But so much of the movie beyond like the struggle to find the bike is this interesting dynamic between the two of them, where you can see that young Bruno looks up to his dad so much, and like his dad is a superhero in his eyes, and it's like breaking his heart to see that his dad can't find the bike and can't do all of the things that he like thought that his dad would be able to do. So I'm curious to hear what you guys thought about, if there were like any specific moments or scenes, or things that Enzo was doing as an actor to communicate all of the weight of the relationship between father and son.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's not even just the best child performances. It's just like flat one of the best performances by an actor. So, someone who wasn't an actor. And a little bit of trivia, I guess, on that is that DeSica was searching for a long time for an actor for this role because he knew that there was a lot of weight to this, and he just saw Enzo in a crowd one day and was like, "Okay, that's the kid." I guess, sometimes you just look at someone, you feel their aura, their energy, and
Mhm.
who would have known that he would
It
have
was
put out this
casting at first
performance,
sight
which
instead of
is
love at first sight.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It's also a testament to DeSica as well, because this is not the first time he'd ever worked with kids, and every child that he has in his films always puts out the best performances, and he that just makes him a great director, because there's a lot of directors through history currently who don't know how to talk to children, and you can tell that it's like you're making this child uncomfortable because you're treating them, differently. Desika would anything I read about him or about him from him is like he would get down to their level and talk to them like human beings and make them feel comfortable, and that's how you get a fantastic performance from an actor, let alone a child actor. But something you briefly said about their relationship, father and son. Yes, there's a lot of heavy moments, but there's moments where the father has to remember, oh, I'm still trying to take care of my child. And at some point, I think Bruno's like kind of running up along these steps or something. And he's like, you gotta get down before you fall. It's like a snapback to be like, this is not just about my mission to find my bike. I also have to make sure that you're safe because you're traveling around the city with me. And it's
Yeah.
it's dangerous. That's when the parenting kicks in. And again, just great acting, great writing to be like, this is not, you can't just focus on, if you're writing a story about parents and the kid is involved, you can't just be like, this is the parent's mission and then the kid is just there. That's just not how a parent, I'll track back. That's maybe not how a good parent is going to behave. And these are, he's a good dad. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And Desika, you mentioned it, but Desika likes to use child actors in a lot of movies from this era, from this realism, neorealism era. And one of those is um, Shoeshine, which came out 2 years before this in '46, and it's about two young boys who also get caught up in fairly small petty crime, but because they're in poverty, they get in trouble and sent to reform school with a lot of boys. And then he makes Umberto D, which is about an older man and a young woman or teenage girl, um, and that's a little bit later. And there's several others, and he's always trying to show he uses children to remind us of what humanity is and should be, what
Hmm.
matters, security, safety, love, a home, friendship, all those sorts of things. And so all those things are highlighted and magnified with children. Um, but the dynamics are, the children carry themselves very precociously. They're very mature kids. This kid in this movie, he's very mature for his age and smart,
Hmm.
and the dad respects his point of view. I think I agree. The way that his father treats him, yes, once in a while he scolds him, or at one point I think he slaps him. Feels bad for it, but that's how desperate things have gotten. Um, I think he respects his own son, and we're supposed to see that whenever he does slap him, it's not a father beating his son. It's almost like he's just bigger. It's a little bit of a bullying moment, and then he feels bad for it. So I don't
Hmm.
know. There's a lot to
Hmm.
think about. I think I'm personally a big fan of movies that have children at the center that are trying to show the way our world operates, but through a kid's point of view. And
Yeah,
yeah,
he like has that childlike wonder and playfulness, but he's fully aware of the gravity of the situation. And in a lot of ways, like the two of them are partners as
yeah,
they're, going on this search. It's not really like, okay, dad's doing something and I'm just there, like following along, kind of like unaware of what's happening. Like, you know, oftentimes we see movies from like a child's perspective and it doesn't really give the child the credit of understanding the full weight of what's going on around him. But like the Bruno character is fully aware of everything that's happening. He like has agency in the situation. And his dad does respect him as both like a son and a partner in this search. It's not like he's like a nuisance to be, dragging Bruno around town or whatever while he's searching for the bike.
yeah. I mean, he also has a job. The son has a job at this gas station, I
Hmm.
guess. Back then it was all hands on deck. If you could
Hmm.
find a way to earn some money,
The good
then
old
you might
days.
you might have to yeah, you might have to be an 8-year-old kid working in a coal mine.
Yeah.
I mean, it was another time. I will say one thing though, the dad is always teaching his son. He's always imparting wisdom. This is how
Hmm.
this works, this is how that works. But as he's doing that, he's teaching us, the audience.
Hmm.
We're learning about how the world works through the father's experience and through him teaching his son. So it's a really interesting device on the part of the screenwriters
Yeah.
to teach us the way this world works through the father's street wisdom, basically.
Need some street smarts. Um, Moving away from the father son dynamic a little bit, I think for me, one of the other big interesting things that's going on in this movie is like while they're on the search specifically, they're really looking for some kind of like relief, some kind of solace, like anywhere that they can go. And the police, as like a representative of like the state, don't offer any assistance to them. And then there's like that scene where they go to the church, and that should be like the ultimate place where we can find solace and like some kind of meaning and purpose and answers to like how to move forward in life, and they don't find it there either. There's like little to no faith in other people because they are also broken by the same system that's breaking down the Ricci family. um yeah, was did you guys have anything about like the church scene or the relationship to like the police and how they are not really able to help, and just like how like everywhere around them like they can't get any sort of assistance in finding this bike?
Yeah, it's interesting about the church scene, and I don't even know if I want to get into that, but that's religion in Italy, Catholicism in Italy. That's a huge thing, and like you said, it would be a place of relief or where you feel like you can go and ask for help. But these are all, it's filled with people who are in the same situation. And why should I take time out of my day to help you when I need help myself? And now, obviously, and you have to kind of understand and that mentality where it's like it kind of is a bit of a dog eat dog world there, but there are people who are willing to help. Now, I don't
Hmm.
know that the police would ever be the people to seek help from in most situations, but in this film, also just thinking about their economic status, I don't know how much the cops are making on their end. They're like, at least I have a stable job, but everyone is in trouble. I cannot be spending my day looking for your bike. And
Hmm.
you have no evidence that this person took your bike. But I do have evidence that you stole a bike. So I'll be there for that. But just thinking about, yeah, there are people with jobs, but realistically, how much are they making? And they're like, I'm not going to risk my livelihood for you. Same way anyone else is not going to risk their livelihood for anyone else. One of, and maybe this kind of ties into, but remember his wife goes to the truth. Oh, what do you call him? Like a psychic,
Fortune teller
a
type
Fortune
fortune
person.
teller or
teller.
something. Yeah.
And this woman who is quite clearly taking advantage of people's desperations. I think that ties into the church and the police, of people being like, I need some ounce of hope. And maybe
Mhm.
she has guessed correctly some things, why
Yeah.
people are lined up to go see her. And but she's obviously taking advantage. Now, she did say he would get a job. And that's why the wife is like, well, she can find your bike. And she's not helpful in any way because you obviously know that she's, I mean, I listen, I maybe she is psychic, but the movie is probably, it's telling us that she's likely not. But you
Yeah.
can understand when when you're at that point, you're like, I will take anything.
Hmm.
Um, and it feels like it's maybe a throwaway scenes, characters, but I don't think it is. I think all those little moments in this movie count, and it just shows the mentality of where people are. And you don't blame anyone. I don't blame that woman. Make your money.
No. Yeah.
It sucks to take advantage of people in very dire situations, but it is what it is, unfortunately.
Yeah. All of these people are being pushed to the brink by the same forces. So we understand, again, the same way that Antonio didn't wake up one day and say, like, I want to steal a bike. She didn't wake up one day and say, I want to deceive people in order to make some money. She was just like, I can't make money for shit. This is the
Yeah.
only, you know, this is the only recourse that I have at this point.
Yeah. A couple of things about that. So the the father, Antonio, he scolds his wife for going there. He's like, "Why do you believe in this irrational stuff?" And then later he goes there. That's how desperate he's become.
Yeah.
And by the way, this entire movie pretty much takes place in about 2 days. So he's really fallen far in about the space of a day or two. Um, but on the church, one thing to point out is they're offering free meals. And so most of the people, or many of the people there, yes, they're praying, but they're definitely waiting for their free meal. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's
Mm.
like one way to get people into that building is to offer free meals. And let me just point out that, and Vittorio De Sica, the director, was a devout Catholic, actually. But that doesn't mean he wasn't critical of the institution and some of its shortcomings. And don't forget, he was an actual communist, so he wanted to find another system, a different economic system that was more equitable and fair, and a fair distribution of resources and full employment. That's sort of the things that he believed in. So
Mm-hmm.
he was trying to show that, if they had all jobs, all this crime would evaporate overnight. Not that there wouldn't be any crime whatsoever, but most of this petty crime would be gone if everybody had jobs. And we should point out that whenever he does get that job, whenever Antonio does get the job, he's so full of pride. He's
Yeah.
excited about his new hat. He's excited
Mm-hmm.
he gets to go around, and all he's doing is putting up posters. But he's like, I get overtime. We're gonna be able to do this. He's dreaming of a new life for his family, and that kind of shatters this myth that poor people just don't want to work. Right? There's this pervasive myth that people that are impoverished just don't want to work and don't work enough. When the reality is, many people would love to have jobs, and the director's very clearly wanting to show that, like, to
Mm-hmm.
shatter that myth that people would just love to have jobs. They're not excited about sneaking around stealing things.
No. It
That's stressful.
it's not a situation that people want to be in, and so to bring it to the bicycle, right, he has all this pride about his new job. He's excited, he's dreaming, he's thinking about all the awesome things that he'll be able to do, and all of it hinges on a bicycle. And the last time that I was rewatching this, I was thinking, and I do think that this is kind of an unfair question, but I do think that it's a fun exercise to do. Is the bicycle a MacGuffin, or is it so much more? Because in a way, it is, if we're just looking at a MacGuffin as something that characters are chasing and trying to track down throughout the course of a film. But obviously, the bicycle in this situation means so much more. So, do you guys think that it's unfair to label the bicycle as MacGuffin, or can we call it MacGuffin plus?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a plot device, so
Mm-hmm.
everything hinges on him having that bicycle or not having it. So in that sense, I don't know if, how, I'm not sure. It's definitely a plot device, but that's a good question.
Yeah. I would agree. It is definitely a plot device, but I think in his reality, he's not just searching for it because it's something that was taken from him. It is what would be his livelihood. Like, he cannot have this job without it. They won't allow him to come back tomorrow without it because he can't go on foot because he needs to make it from place to place. It would be like a lot of jobs nowadays where you need to have a driver's license or a car to get around to places. And I think we can all relate to needing something for employment, whether even if it's a degree or a bike. Like, my situation wasn't as dire as this, but when I was living in Dublin, I had a job that I used to walk to for like an hour in the mornings because I didn't want to take the city bus because it cost too much. And my boss was like, "Please don't walk. Get a bike because it's dangerous where you're walking through in Dublin." So I saved up for a few weeks, tied it up outside of work, and when I came out, someone had stolen it, and um, I know I left my bike here, so where is it? And it sucked because then I had to save up again for a few weeks for another bike, and I know that that bike just went back to the same lot where it was, and I
Yeah.
swear I went back and looked, and I was like, "I know my bike is here," and I just had to buy another one, which is unfortunate, but it's something I didn't need it to have my job, but I was like, "Cool, well, now I have to wake up an hour earlier than I would've to get to it." So I don't think I would consider it a MacGuffin. I think it does stand for so much more, in the
Mhm.
film, but also to that character. You know, he's also searching for maybe more meaning also, and the bike symbolizes multiple things, but I think the bike really is it's not the heart of the story. The heart of the story is the new beginnings maybe, and showing the hope that we have, and I think the heart of the story really is in that last scene of which I'm sure we'll talk about, the two of them walking, amongst the crowd of people. And I'm sure we'll talk about the last scene because I think just that whole sequence is really fascinating. But yeah, I don't know that I would consider it a MacGuffin. But if you do, I am curious to hear why you would.
No, I don't think that I do. Also, I just gotta say, I can't believe that we got, like, almost an hour into this before you revealed to us that you had your own Bicycle Thieves
I
story.
know. I know. Trust
That felt
me.
like something that we should have been talking about on the front end.
I talk about it quite a bit because that's even though I got another bike after, and it wasn't the first bike I've ever had that was stolen, it was one that it took me so long to save up for that I was actually just devastated. I had to sit down on the curb for a while and cry it out,
Like Antonio and Bruno.
quite literally. And I was like, "Well, that sucks. That was
Okay,
200 euro down the drain."
how many things did you think about before you got to, "I am living my own version of Bicycle Thieves"? Were you like, "Oh shit, my bike is stolen. Oh, nice, this is Bicycle Thieves. How do I save up to get another bike? Where can my bike be?" Or like,
I
where yeah.
mean, pretty much those are the stages. I mean, first I just gaslighted myself. I was like, "I must have moved it."
Mhm.
And then I just walked around the block. So I was like, "No, there's no way I would park it out there." I parked it right outside of work. And I was told that there is a huge bike theft problem in Dublin. And I was like, "Well, I guess I'm another victim."
A victim of the same system that Antonio
I
is victim
mean,
to.
yeah.
One
Again,
of
less serious and dire in
Yeah.
their situation. But yeah.
This is a little side point, but one of the things that's unique about our era, that's different about the era from that film, is now we have credit cards. And one of the the people who run our economic system, the economic system, let's say, was very smart in inventing a system called the credit system. So even if you don't have enough money for a bike, you can charge one if you can manage to get a credit card. And you may be in debt, and that might be piling up and piling up, but that's what's essentially saved the economic system that we live under, is a credit system. So
Otherwise, we pawning off, I'd have to pawn
well,
off my Seven Samurai poster in order
Yeah.
to get a bicycle, in
yeah,
order to
and it
go to
really
work.
tells you, like, the fact that there's this, when she pawns off the sheets, there he takes them to the back warehouse, and there's just a huge wall of sheets.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't pawn sheet in 2025. You couldn't go to the pawn shop and say, "I want to pawn these sheets," because we're up to our eyeballs in cheap commodities now, right? Anyway, don't get me started on our economic system. It is a very compelling interrogation of that system, and yet most people never bother to look into it. But anyway,
Yeah. And I mean, we talk about how the movie kind of highlights the cycles that people fall into because of the system where Antonio at the end is also stealing a bike, but we also see these cycles kind of revealing themselves in real life in history, where you watch Bicycle Thieves in 2025, and I think a lot of people in America across the globe can relate to needing something that they maybe don't fully have the resources to have in order to work, in order to gain more resources, right? Like Felicia
Hmm.
brought up a great point of like, for a lot of employment, you need like some kind of advanced degree. And, for a lot of us, that is our modern day bicycle, where if you don't have this degree, then you can't work and then, be able to provide for your family. And should something happen where someone steals your degree or something, we'll try to follow this analogy uh, down the road. Don't think about how it doesn't make any sense at this point. But if someone steals your degree, then you're just like Antonio, and you're searching across Rome in order to get it back so that you can go to work. And it's just very interesting how a lot of these things, these cycles repeat over time as they repeat within the movie itself. We spoke about the final scene, which we want to bring up, but before we get there, is there anything else about Bicycle Thieves that either of you guys want to bring up before we talk about the end scene and kind of wrap up our discussion about this flick?
I'll bring up something that's just I always just find funny. It's very throw off, just my mentality. There's a few scenes where we see Bruno and mother and father. I'm like, okay, but where's the baby? Because I don't think
Yeah.
they have other like grandparents watching this baby. So I'm like, did you just leave that newborn baby at home alone? And probably they did. Like, oh, she's
Italian babies are
sleeping.
very self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that.
There's a few times where I'm like, where is the, and I think there's a couple times where it's like the mother and father, it's probably Bruno watching the baby. And again, it's like, I know this Bruno has a full blown job, but he's still a baby. An 8-year-old is going to be a baby to me. But also, you brought up a good point of him having the job. I think that also shows it's both personality and just being able to talk to human beings and adults. Because a lot of 8-year-olds, I mean, a lot of adults can't talk to adults, but a lot of children can't talk to adults, nor should they even really have to. They should be able to just live in their own worlds. But in that situation, he is very comfortable around adults, um, and sometimes maybe a little too comfortable. Because there is that one scene with the man who is, thankfully, it's not too long, but it just shows that there are so many other things involved, and this still is a child, and there are predatory behaviors that you still need to shield your children from. And there's just a lot in this movie, packed into this movie, but it never feels stuffed. It just feels like I, again, if I were to ever write a film, I would have to study the script. I think it's just so well done how they managed to tackle so many different things without it ever feeling like they were rushing through it, because the time run is short, and never feeling
Hmm.
like they're putting in way too much. So yeah,
And it never pauses to like tell you like, hey, we're looking at this thing now. It just
yeah,
naturally happens throughout the flow of the movie, of the flow of the narrative, where you can pick up on it and think, oh wow, it's interesting that this movie is tackling this topic, but it's not necessarily like drawing full attention to it, which is one of the best signs of a great script, for
yeah.
sure. Should we talk about this final scene? Which I have to be honest, because I didn't rewatch this movie for this particular recording, I'm kind of forgetting. So if you guys can remind me what it is exactly that happens, maybe jog my memory a little bit, so I can uh, talk to you guys about it.
I
Yeah.
mean, just um, well, the dad Antonio, he sees this kid, this teenager who presumably is the thief, and he tracks him down and runs into his house, uh, and drags him out into the street, and he's accusing him of stealing it, but there's no bike to be found. He doesn't have any evidence.
Hmm.
And a crowd forms, and the boy runs off and grabs the police. Meanwhile, the kid has a seizure, and he's like, falling down on the ground, and it's a big scene in in the street, and the crowd all has that teenager's back because they know him. He's a neighborhood kid, and they think that these guys falsely accused him. And then the cop shows up and says, "Where's the evidence?" They go and look in the house, didn't find anything, and he leaves. They just let it go. Antonio and the son just walk away, and then that's when he sees a bike during a sporting match, probably like a soccer match. There's a huge crowd, there's a lot of bikes, and he sees
Mhm.
one and steals it, and he's apprehended by the police in a crowd immediately, and then he's just standing there like dejected. And that's really what happens. I mean, it fades out. That's the end of the movie, is that look how far he sunk in a matter of a day or two. Is there anything else to add to that description?
No, I think that's you definitely covered it. And if you want to break it down, I always find it fascinating that it's all that row of bikes that they show this shot, and you don't ever need to see that they're all at a sporting match. We all can hear the crowds. But thinking about, I don't know what it costs to go see a soccer football match at that time, but maybe also it's kind of mirroring the scene where they go to the restaurant where, like, maybe these people, this is like the one time they're going to treat themselves to go
Mhm.
see something and feel alive. And that's why you can see in Antonio's eyes where he's like, there's all these bikes, none of them are locked up. One going missing, I never have to see who I took the bike from. Unlike the guy who stole his bike, saw his face and saw that he was working. I
Yeah.
never have to see the person, and no one is out here to take the bike, but he's deliberating for so long that he does it a little too late and he gets caught. And you can see in Bruno's eyes the disappointment and the embarrassment, and
Hmm.
Antonio looking at his son being like, I can't believe I embarrassed myself and my son. And the walk that they take and they're holding their hands, it's just so it's incredibly sad, but you also don't feel dejected at the end. At least I don't. I always feel like they're still going to make it through. They have each other. And I know that's kind of corny, but it is essentially they have each other in the end and they will make
Mhm.
it through. Uh they might not, but at least they have each other, and there's a lot of people out there who are in the same situations that don't have any family and don't have anything other than themselves. And at least having someone who loves you is great. So that's why I think this movie, sometimes you watch a really depressing movie and you're like, that's a one and done. This one I've
Yeah.
rewatched multiple times because there is at least an ounce of hope at the end. And it's so beautiful. And it's sad watching them amongst the crowd walking, but it it's life.
Hmm.
That's the movie.
The human spirit prevails at the end, and through love, all things are possible. Um, that's a
And full employment.
Yeah.
Love and full employment.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I've never thought about it as a somewhat hopeful kind of ending, but I do like that reading. I like that takeaway that there
Hmm.
is still hope for the two of them because they have each other, and that kind of goes back to, you know, for me, the last time that I watched this movie, the father son relationship like really stood out. Um, might be placing some of my own, personal thoughts and feelings onto that, but it ends with the two of them in the crowd, and at the end of the day, like all they have is each other, and they can lean on each other. Like we were saying before, it's a partnership that the two of them have. We know that their love and bond is strong, and if they can survive the last 90 minutes that we watched, then they can survive anything. So, Felicia, thanks for bringing us to a happy ending, because I don't know that I would have gotten there on my own.
It's one of my rare times of finding hope in a movie. But I always just think of Bruno grabbing his hand because he could have just been like, okay, I'm going to follow my dad, but so embarrassed that he's like, I don't really want to be seen with him. But
Yeah,
Bruno loves his dad and he's like, it's okay. Like he understands. And I think that's where the hope is, that my child didn't fully reject me in my lowest moment. So, yeah.
Damn, I think I'm about to start crying. That was beautiful.
Well, it's it is a poignant moment, and it's also a nice reminder that like some people have, you know, let's think about prison for a second. It's full of people who are punished for having the worst day of their life. Not saying that they don't deserve it. I'm just saying like and having a felony status which prevents people from getting jobs. Like if you have a felony, you have a hard time getting a job in the United States. And even if it was something you committed when you're 18 and now you're 75 or
Hmm.
60 or whatever, and so this thing is a stamp for life. And essentially what it is, it's a reminder of the worst day of your life, and that's sort of what we see here in this film. This film essentially is narrating the worst day of this man's life, and he made some mistakes, but he shouldn't be condemned forever for those mistakes. And the son sees that. And that's
Hmm.
the maturity of the son, honestly. The son has more grace and forgiveness, and he understands the full context of why it happened in a
Yeah.
way that invites the viewer to think about the full context of why it happened.
Yeah. The Bruno doesn't he's seen his dad's worst day, but he understands that his dad is not that. He understands that he's so much more. And
Right.
again, the movie, by having them walk off in the crowd, go home and go on with their lives, the movie is also letting us know that like that Antonio will not be defined by those worst moments, and we have seen all of the good in him and his son and everything that he has tried to do. And um, it's going to be shitty. It's going to be hard, but he will power through. Um, wow.
Yeah. Even the good in other people too, because the guy could have been a dickhead and charged him, but he was like, it's not. He
Oh,
probably
oh, the
somewhat,
victim of the guy whose bike he stole.
yeah,
Yeah.
he could have charged him, but
Yeah.
he didn't. And whether it's because he saw he's with his son, or if he just had a moment where he's like, maybe I've also been in the same situation. It
Maybe
just
Roma FC
shows,
won that day and he was flying
yeah.
high because his favorite
I mean,
football club won a game and he was like, you know what, I'll give this guy
maybe
a
that
break.
too.
Yeah.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
And it just shows the humanity in a lot of people, that
Hmm.
at the end of the day we still, even if we're looking at for ourselves, you do want to, most people want to at least help out one another in any way they can, and that is a way that he can without it taking anything from him. What is he going to gain from charging him, really?
Hmm.
Yeah. As much as the system and the forces that they're forced to live within kind of like try to tear them apart as community, as people, uh they're still able to see each other's humanity, want to help out, want to help each other out. The only reasons that anyone does anything, that anyone mistreats anyone else in the movie, is because they're all desperate and they recognize that they're coming from the same place of desperation and it's not because they dislike each other or anything like that. So yeah, an ultimately hopeful view on Bicycle Thieves. This has been an absolutely incredible conversation. I feel like, so because we've been so serious and thoughtful the whole time, I'm gonna undercut that with a joke. And I've realized that I've been talking with my hands a lot, and I feel like it's because we're talking about an Italian movie, and it's rubbing off on me.
Yeah. I love Italian movies and I love the Italian language.
Seriously, thank you both for joining. This has been a great conversation.
My pleasure.
Hmm.
Absolutely, so much fun. Absolute pleasure having both you guys on to talk Bicycle Thieves and why it's essential. I feel like we have fully given folks a complete understanding of why this is a must watch for any film fan. If anyone's still listening and hasn't seen Bicycle Thieves, finish the rest of this episode and then go watch it. You will definitely enjoy it. And if it's been a while since you've seen it, give it a rewatch because it's amazing. Before we get out of here, we should do some recommendations for Bicycle Thieves. If you guys are ready, we can jump right into that. We're each recommending 3 things, at least 1 movie, 2 other things, can be any and everything else. I assume from you guys it's going to be more movies because I know how y'all get down. We're film fans over here. For the order, we can go Jason, Felicia, and then Raph, and give us, yeah, Jason, whenever you're ready, give us your first recommendation, brief explanation for why you're recommending it, how it relates back to Bicycle Thieves, and we'll take it from there.
I think I'm going to recommend the movie Salt of the Earth from 1954 or 5, depending on where you look, by the American director Herbert J. Biberman. And the reason
Great
why,
name.
yeah, great movie. And we did an episode actually on this movie last year. The reason why I'm recommending this movie, though, is this was one of the few, well, you could say it was the first independently made um, social realist film in the vein of Italian neorealism, maybe in U.S. history. And it is unbelievable. I mean, it's just, if you see this movie, you're going to be shocked that it was even made at all. And in fact, it was made rogue. I mean, they self-financed it. They were all blacklisted. So the director, the producer, and the screenwriter were all three blacklisted during the McCarthy era, and so they weren't allowed to make movies. And so they raised money independently, and they weren't allowed to they couldn't find camera operators or other people to do the movie because they were shut out of the industry and the union wouldn't allow them to. So they found a few documentary filmmakers in New York to help actually shoot the film, and they did it on location completely in southwest New Mexico at this coal mine. Not a coal mine; it's a zinc mine.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie is based on a real historical event. This worker strike in just a couple of years before that, and they used the actual the miners. They used the actual miners who participated in the strike, and they essentially played versions of themselves. And there were only, I don't know, 3 or 4 professional actors, and they weren't well known at all, but they were
Mm-hmm.
just a small handful of professional actors. And the union leader was actually the real life union leader who played a version of themselves. Anyway, the government tried to shut it down. The FBI was all over it. There was like people beating up the cast and crew. There was some shootings, and the government actually arrested the lead actress and deported her back to Mexico, and she was blacklisted for life just for having the audacity to make this movie. There's a lot about this out there. We did an episode on it, as I said, but Salt of the Earth, highly recommend. And it's just gorgeous and fascinating, and it's about as raw as it gets for it's not even Hollywood. I mean, they're Hollywood people, but it's made, like I
Mm-hmm.
said, independently.
Nice. I love that. That's an amazing recommendation.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet.
Strong
And
start.
You
Very
got to
strong
see
start.
that one.
I know, I was reading it while you were talking, reading about it. I was like, this is fascinating. Um, I also went movie route. I was thinking of parental with children dynamics. So that's kind of the theme running through all 3 of my picks. But the first one, thinking of a director who definitely would have been influenced, maybe not see it in his work, but he's just a huge movie head. So I thought about Bogdanovich's 1973 film Paper Moon,
Yep.
about a father and daughter dynamic, and he's a con artist and ends up having to take her along the ride as he's trying to swindle people here and there out of money because the mother is passed on and he can't really shake her, so he has to be a father alongside a petty criminal. Also shot in black and white, really beautifully, and it just kind of brings it into another era of history, but also in American history, and just seeing like he is someone who is struggling, and yes, he could get another job, but this is what's coming easier to him. It's easier to
Mm.
just kind of travel around and get, steal a bit of money here and there to make their way to the next town. And a great performance by Tatum O'Neal, who obviously I'm sure we all know won an Oscar for that performance. Um, so yeah, that's my first one of just switching it around. Now we have a father and daughter in this one. Yeah.
Nice.
I
Great
still haven't
recommendation.
seen that movie. I
Oh, I
need
think
to.
you'll like it.
I
Same.
I've been meaning to see it, but haven't.
It's anyone who has like listened to this entire season of recommendations has probably heard me say this phrase a lot, but it's been on my watch list for years.
Same.
That's fair.
Yeah, can't wait to watch it. Okay, you guys gave two really thoughtful recommendations. I'm gonna do two albums and a movie, and I'm gonna get my silly album out of the way first. Or well, it's not silly. The album isn't silly. The connection to the movie is silly. Um, Bicycle Thieves, obviously, we know it's about bicycle. Vampire Weekend song, obvious bicycle on the what is probably a masterpiece of an album, Modern Vampires of the City. It's the opening track, so we're just going bicycle to bicycle. That's my first recommendation, but it is an incredible album that folks should listen to.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, I take it you guys aren't Vampire Weekend heads.
I know of them, and I know that album. I know their hits. Like I would be on the more basic side of
Yeah,
knowing their music. But that's interesting.
yeah. Um, I'm oddly kind of a Vampire Weekend head. There are like three
Well then.
Black Vampire Weekend fans out there, and I am one of them.
I'm sure that's not true.
And your
We
two
have a
friends.
Facebook group. Yeah. Jason, we're back to you.
There's so many options. There's so many choices. Um, I I'm gonna have to go with a movie that it's called Los Olvidados in Spanish. Usually the English translation is The Young and the Damned. This is a Luis Buñuel film from 1950. So, like like the movie we just discussed, Bicycle Thieves, it shines a light on the impoverished life of young people, children, teenagers in Mexico City. But you see a beautiful, historic, affluent Mexico City life in the background. So you see fancy cars and cafes and so forth. But then you see this other side of that, which is these children who live, some on the street, some in flop houses, and some with their parents, kind of in this underbelly slum little situation around that affluent city. And the same thing we didn't really mention, but you do see fancy buildings
Mm-hmm.
in Bicycle Thieves. There is a nice city here. Is trying to recover from the war. They're building buildings as they're filming this. They're reconstructing and fixing up the city. So, but Los Olvidados is about, or Young and the Damned. It's about kids who hustle, do petty crimes to survive, and a good kid gets caught up in this. And I won't say any more, but it's just a very powerful film that I've seen multiple times. I'm a fan of Luis Buñuel. He's Spanish, but he made a lot of films in Mexico for years, and then kind of went back to Europe at some point. Made some in France and Spain and other places, but it's a great movie.
Great recommendation. I feel like that's been recommended before. Not by you, but great minds think alike. So it's been on the watch list for years. That's my
Hmm.
catchphrase. I love it.
If you need somebody to discuss it, I don't know if it's on your list, but it's a great movie.
I don't think it's on our list, but something I need to watch for sure.
I
It's one of
mean,
those. It's one of those movies that angered a lot of moviegoers in Mexico. They're like, "How dare you portray us in this negative way?"
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, this is not far fetched. This exists. You just don't want to look at it."
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's actually funny. Two things. One, I definitely plan on doing a Binwell month, so I will remember that. And two, it's similar to the way a lot of audience members reacted to Bicycle Thieves and Desika's work at first. They didn't like it either. They were like, "Why are you portraying us this way?"
Hmm.
Because no one wants to see their lives reflected that way because they thought of it as being um, looking down on them when he
Hmm.
wasn't. And then obviously it was much it's like celebrated and considered like historical, gold in Italy,
Hmm.
all these movies. But you can understand when you're like, well, this is the life I'm living. I don't necessarily want to watch uh myself on screen because it's sometimes too real. But obviously people change their mind with as things change. But my second one, another movie, switching if we're thinking about binaries in terms of genders, now switching it to mother daughter relationship. This one, it kind of feels quite opposite to this, but holds a lot of the same mentality. So I've thought about Michael Curtiz's film Mildred Pierce. So Mildred Pierce, played by Joan Crawford, is is she has a restaurant that she runs and is quite successful, and she has two kids and she's a single mother, and her daughter resents the fact that her mom is working because at the time a lot of women wouldn't be working that way and they certainly wouldn't be running their own business, and she thought it lowered their social status. And it's the opposite of how Bruno would think about his dad if his dad was successful, and she just can't understand why her daughter is so upset with her. So I think that's an interesting dynamic to think of. Again, another American film, and the way people, if it were the genders were switched in Bicycle Thieves, how it would change the story quite dramatically.
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
1000%.
That's a great movie. I love that movie.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation to think about. That kind of what if gender swap um, in this movie, and like how the story would play out. Um, Mildred Pierce has been on the watch list for years. Um,
And that's the same director as Casablanca.
yes. Um, you know, once I finish this season and I have some time away from editing and recording this pod, I'm gonna knock out some of these movies on the watch list because it's getting too long.
I'm gonna
Uh,
text you every week. Hey, have you seen Mildred Pierce yet?
yeah, please do keep me
Have you
honest, guys.
seen Los Olvidados yet?
Keep me honest. What's the status update on Paper Moon? You watch it yet? Um, for my second recommendation, I'm going to recommend another album. And when you guys are checking in on me to see if I've watched any of these movies on my watch list, I will probably say no. But what I have done is re-listen to this album for the 4 millionth time. So we talk about this movie being one that is highlighting the lived experience of underrepresented, underclass people, and what it is, what their struggles are, and how it is that they, have to live through that life. So I was thinking about art and like specifically music that kind of does the same thing. And obviously, a lot of like the best rap hip hop albums are doing just that. It's taking someone's lived experience and creating some kind of art around that truth. Oftentimes, people who are poor, underclass, forced by the systems that they live within to do things, to commit crime that they otherwise wouldn't be doing if it weren't for those systems. And like there are a million different, you know, albums that I could recommend for this, but one that stood out in particular in terms of highlighting that was Nas's Illmatic, which is one of the best albums of all time. I also had to balance out the Vampire Weekend, so that's why we're going with Illmatic.
Nice.
one of
Good
one of my favorite
recommendation.
albums. So good.
Yeah, I know that album too. I'm not super familiar. Um, with I'm sure what would be what's the
Oh
single
man,
on that? What are the singles?
It Ain't Hard to Tell. Memory Lane is on that one. I think there is a title track, Illmatic.
Mm.
What else? No, is The World Is Yours on Illmatic, or is that on Stillmatic? Life's a Bitch, New York State of Mind, Halftime. The World Is Yours is on this. One Love. Yeah, it's just like it's a no skip kind of album.
Oh,
Um,
I mean, I I asked knowing full well that I wouldn't know any of the songs, because I'm not that familiar with hip hop and rap either, but I do know Nas, and, like, I'm sure if I heard it, I've been like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, I know
most
the
of those
song."
songs you probably don't know by name, but as soon
Yeah.
as you hear like first couple
Mhm.
of notes of the beat and like one or two of his bars, you'll be like, yeah, I've heard the song
Okay.
1,000
Nice.
times. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. I figured you guys would have 3 movies each, so I was like, let me not do 3
Yeah.
movies and try to balance this
No, I
out
love that.
with
You
yeah.
figured right. You
Yeah.
figured right for me.
Yeah.
I have 3 movies.
Same.
I actually have about 10 movies, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to whittle it down to 3.
What's your third movie?
Man, it's so hard to because let me just say what Italian neorealism did was it showed that there is this whole way to tell stories cinematically about real life issues without dressing it up in the spectacle too much, without making it like, without using these Hollywood tropes of the spectacle. And we call that broad genre social realism. And, it really influenced filmmakers around the world from all across places like India, where there was a lot of poverty. Satyajit Ray, his Apu trilogy is a masterpiece. And that's what I wanted to recommend, but I'm not going to recommend that. I think well, I am going to recommend that, but I'm going to do it unofficially because I want to
Yeah.
recommend something else. But in the UK context, there's a lot of movies in this vein, what we call social realism. And one of the people most known for this is Ken Loach. And he's still alive. He's
Mhm.
close to 90 now, and he's made a lot of movies. But the movie I'm going to recommend is actually a recent one, which you might be surprised because I'm always talking about old movies. But I'm going to recommend I, Daniel Blake from 2016.
Mm,
Just a brilliant film. I mean, it won the Palme d'Or, so it's not obscure by any means.
yeah.
But it's just an incredible film that shows kind of like in the first part of um, the movie we just discussed, Bicycle Thieves, where he's waiting for this job postings. We have a situation where this guy is um, needing he's retired and he's needing like welfare check essentially. And what it does is it shows that these systems are built to help people, but there's so much red tape and there's so much systemic issues within the systems that it's actually hard to even fill out the paperwork or to get the benefits that you're actually owed and things like that. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through, and therefore it discourages people from even bothering and that sort of thing. So it's just shining a light on this man and his friendship with this younger woman who has a kid, and they're living in a pretty, they're not homeless or anything, but they're living hand to mouth in, I think it's in northern England. And it's just great writing, great performances. Uh, to me, it's a contemporary masterpiece. So that's my
Nice.
recommendation.
I love it. I've not watched any Ken Loach, so
Oh,
more homework
yeah, you
for
should
Mhm.
me.
watch. You should watch some Ken Loach. I could give you some recs. He's great. His movie Kess is also about a young boy, and it's
Mhm.
wonderful.
That's what I thought you were when you mentioned Ken Loach. I thought you were gonna go for Kez.
Kess.
Uh, I
I was
think
thinking about some of the themes of Bicycle Thieves, and Ken. I Daniel Blake has a lot of theme.
no, I mean the minute you mentioned Ken Loach, I was like, he is for sure a contemporary of that movement. and he also, yeah, he makes a lot of great films. Even his modern, more recent ones. I don't know how he has it in him, but good for him. Um, love that.
I
um,
don't know if he's going to make any more. He's
I don't
getting pretty
know.
old.
Yeah, I mean, I would be retiring way before that, I hope. But I love when people just have enough artistry in them to keep pushing through.
Yeah.
It's something to aspire to, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But my last one, I guess the last dynamic would be mother and son. And I also went a little more modern. This one's 2014, a Canadian film by Xavier Dolan called Mommy. And it's about a single mother and her teenage son. And all the odd jobs that she has to kind of work. She mostly works as like a cleaner in people's houses, but sometimes she has to pick up other little jobs here, and she's just struggling to get by day. And the son has a bit of a behavioral problem. Not bit of, he does have an issue, and she's trying to balance. I have to get to work. I can't necessarily take care of you all the time because you're old enough ish to do that, but also trying to provide him the love that he is seeking and needing, and the struggles of that modern day people are like, I need to work, but I have kids. How do I balance being in their lives while also making sure that they have a roof over their head and clothes on their back? It just shows that why this movie is timeless, because it's an unfortunate thing that we can all still, a lot of people can relate to. And I don't think that's ever going to go away. The struggles of needing any sort of way of living. So I think we've all, from our picks, kind of just gone through various decades in history and why this
Hmm.
story is, still unfortunately relevant.
Yeah.
For
It
sure.
will. Well, hopefully it doesn't remain relevant for all of eternity, but it seems like it
Yeah.
might be. Um, for my final recommendation, I need to recommend a movie. I think I'm gonna go with something pretty modern. I think a little bit more modern than your guys' last picks. Also, a parent-child relationship where the parent is forced into, you know, is trying to work in order to provide for the kid. The kid is wise beyond their years in terms of understanding the gravity and the weight of the situation around them. Parent is, in many ways, forced into um, committing crimes that aren't necessarily crimes that they would be committing if it weren't for the structures around them. A filmmaker who I think does draw from a lot of the folks who you guys mentioned, as well as from Desika and from Bicycle Thieves. I think a movie that has maybe been seen a bit more widely than some of the ones that you recommended, but I'm going to go with Sean Baker's The Florida Project, which is an absolutely
Yeah.
incredible movie.
Yeah. Good movie.
And I was trying to think of like,
Exactly. This
yeah,
is a social realism example. It's a recent example of exactly the kind of thing that they were doing.
yeah. I was trying to think of movies with like other, parent child relationships, best child performances, and
Hmm.
I was like, I don't really want to recommend The Florida Project, but I just like couldn't stop thinking about it while we were talking about
Sure.
the movie and thinking about the movie. So, yeah, that's my final recommendation. Thank you both for the great recommendations. Uh, enriching everyone's watch list. Thank you guys for joining to talk about this movie. This has been an absolute blast. Always a pleasure having both of you on. ScreenAgers, check out Cold War Cinema, check out Seeing Faces in Movies, wherever you get your podcasts. Both great shows. We will link. We'll put links to both shows in the show notes. Any final plugs or anything that you guys want to say before we get out of here?
No, I think you covered it. Thanks for having us on. It was nice talking to both of you again. I had a
Yeah.
blast.
Agreed. Yeah, I had a great time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming on. Always welcome. Always a blast. Love having you guys on. Screenagers will be back next week, or maybe later this week. Who knows? I don't know what's going on with the schedule anymore. But our next episode will be Doctor Zhivago with Dylan Gantz is coming back. So We had him on earlier this season talking American Graffiti and talking a little bit about the short film that he's making. Just finished wrapping shooting, so we'll get some updates there, and we'll talk another essential movie. Should be a great time. You can catch the Canon wherever it is that you are, whichever feed you're catching us on now. We're on Spotify, Apple, catch us on YouTube, and on the website proper, where there are a ton of other great articles and whatnot. And as always, in the meantime, we will catch all of you lovely folks in the wasteland. Ciao. And I didn't mess that one up.
Awesome.